Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a guest I have on as a regular. He started coming on years ago, and people just love him. I mean, about every, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, I start getting this parade of contacts and messages on YouTube and the site to, hey, when are you going to have Bill Holter back on? Well, today is the day we're going to have Bill Holter back on from the Sinclair-Holter collaboration, or the Holter-Sinclair collaboration over at JS Mindset. Just two smart dudes, what can I say? And I got one of them today. Bill Holter, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Last week, gold market killing it. They're trying to kill it, but they didn't do much damage. I mean, they dumped a lot of gold on the market on, I don't know, Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at least.
Right. It was 3 days in a row. On Tuesday, they dumped 22,000 contracts. That's about $3 billion. It knocked the price of gold down about $8 or $10, and I made a comment early that day as it looked like gold was holding and starting to creep higher. It held at that $10 down low, and it actually closed up $5 or $6 for the day. So there was actually a $15 rally after they dumped $3 billion worth of paper. Then they took another swing at it on Wednesday. They got very little traction on that. It was $3 or $4 was the damage on that, and then they took another swing on Thursday. On Thursday. I don't know what the actual volume is or was on that, but you can see the volume spike, and these were very concentrated sells. In other words, on Tuesday, I think it was over a 10 or 15 minute time period. On Wednesday, it was over just a couple of minutes. It was a very, very concentrated sale. And that $3 billion on Tuesday and the $3 billion on Wednesday, you add those two together, and that's 7 or 8% of global production. So,
totally fraudulent.
Yes, it's totally fraudulent because there's no gold behind it. They're selling paper. But the point being, these were a couple of big swings that they got absolutely no traction out of at all. So gold is acting differently. It's above the 200-week moving average. The number 1291 is the downtrend line that goes back to 2011. So it's 5 or 6 years been in place, and we've ticked it a few times, and it really looks like this time it's going to happen. This is the gold market is at an inflection point. The silver market, the stock markets, there are inflection points everywhere. And the dollar is definitely starting to look weak.
You called this a panic, that you talked on JS Mindset, that this is a panic. It's panic on the powers that be end. Explain what you mean by this attack on gold, silver, whatever, as being a quote unquote panic.
Right. Well, you have to understand that that gold is the direct competitor versus the dollar. The other currencies in the world, yes, they compete with the dollar, but gold, the dollar is the reserve currency, and it supplanted gold back in 1971, or you could go back to 1933. But in any case, gold and the dollar are direct competitors, arch enemies, whatever you want to call it. The best way to make the dollar look good is to make gold look bad, and that's what all these naked sales of contracts to suppress the price. That's the purpose of it. And to see on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday 3 big sales back to back to back, it shows that the captains of the dollar are panicking, because the dollar is looking toppy. The dollar has been taking, it definitely looks like it's rolling over, and it's been taking some fairly sizable downside drops intraday.
The other thing is that, you have long said that, when this thing goes, when this candle gets lit, when this bottle rocket goes off, I mean, it's going to go off fast. I mean, and if you take a look at some of we're headed, we got Well, who knows what carriers we have going to the Korean Peninsula? It's, we do, we don't, whatever. We got a couple, apparently, or maybe three, which they're not going to go there for a fishing trip. They're not going to all pull up there and get their rods and reels out and zing. Hey, man, hope we catch something. I mean, they're not going to do that. Syria is a mess. We have their president wants a border wall, period, at the end, and they're threatening a government shutdown on a couple of different levels. Marine Le Pen could end up being the president of France, and all this stuff is happening just in the upcoming week. You got to be looking at this if you're look at the gold market, and you and Jim are have your own podcast and your own discussions on what are you guys thinking? What's your thought process here? Because that's what a lot of people want to know. What are you and Jim, and you really, because you're the guy sitting here, but Jim Sinclair, please, any thoughts from him would be good too.
Well, you're absolutely right. There are so many potential detonators out there, and I've long said, and Jim has long said, that because of the derivatives outstanding today, once something blows up, the whole system blows up within 48 hours. The globe will spin twice, and basically markets will close. So it really amazes me that there are so many potential fire events out there, yet there's zero concern. And I do want to correct one thing, Greg. You mentioned that there's 3 carrier groups headed toward Korea. Supposedly one was going to be there in the next day or two. That was the Carl Vinson, and it turns out they're not even close to Korea. They are actually headed south and into or toward the Indian Ocean. So, whether that was subterfuge or what, that's not going to be part of whatever happens if something happens with Korea.
Well, Korea is also threatening last week a massive, huge, whatever you want to call Kim Jong unstable. He is, threatening a massive strike. Does he have one of his submarines off the coast off the East Coast? Does he have a couple of his submarines off the West Coast? Is he going to fire on Silicon Valley, L.A.? I don't know. Seattle? I don't know. I mean, we could sink one of those subs just as a preemptive. You got one of your subs too close to our territory, and I don't know if they launch from the submarine, and I'm sure they have the capability of doing so. They say they have nuclear capabilities. Could we knock that down before it does major damage? I mean, give me your thoughts on that.
Well, nobody knows. My thoughts on that, and along with everything else, is you're going to wake up one morning and something somewhere will have already happened. And at that point, it'll be too late for you to do anything. In other words, you're going to wake up one morning and find out there was a dog fight between a MiG and U.S. fighters, or a sub was sunk, or a big bank becomes insolvent. Who knows what it's going to be or where it's going to come from? There's just too many of them. The point being, it's here and now. It's a dry barn, and they're flicking matches all over the world. So my point being, you're going to wake up in the morning and it will have already happened. And at that point, what do you do?
Well, I wanted to, we were talking about this in pre-interview. I called you, the night before the interview and said, hey, what are you doing? He said, I don't know, just doing a few things. I said, I was out shopping. He said, are you getting a final few last provisions, just in case? Which is not so, I know you're laughing, but actually, yes, I keep everything fluffed up. Right. I don't mean to sound like, a crazy person, but maybe I know too much. This is what people ask me constantly. He said, would you please ask your guest, what's it going to look like for the little guy? And I ask that a lot. I don't get very good answers. I think you can give a better one. What's it going to look like for the little guy if this Roman candle of derivatives goes off and 48 hours later, the whole world's changed, according to you? What's it look like in your mind?
Well, understand that the world runs on credit. Everything you do has to do with credit. As an exercise, wake up in the morning and don't even have to do it all day long. Just wake up in the morning, and from when you wake up until noontime, whatever you do, think and wonder if what you're doing could be done without credit. And I guarantee you, pretty much everything that you do involves credit, including flushing the toilet. I mean, utilities are run on credit. Everything is run on credit. And credit that's what the problem in the world today is too much credit, and much of it is bad. Much of it is unpayable, will never be paid. So credit is the problem. And the world for the little guy is going to for everyone, is going to completely change, where you're going to need to become self-sufficient as far as food, maybe for water, maybe for electricity, who knows. But your trip to Walmart or the grocery store because you forgot a loaf of bread, food and goods are not going to make it to store shelves. Think about the loaf of bread. There's 7, 8, 10 different uses of credit between the farmer, or actually the seed, between the seed and the loaf of bread. There's probably 8 or 10 uses of credit. If one of those credit events breaks down, that loaf of bread's not going to get to the store. And I submit that it's probably 90% or more of the credit at some point in time is going to cease.
I want to kind of bring Jim in here. Not that you're not a great guest, because you are. You're a fantastic guest. But, Jim Sinclair chose you to be his collaboration partner. That's why the Holter-Sinclair collaboration. He's very smart. He's seen everything in the markets. Now, this is not some crazy wackadoodle, I'm held up in my mommy's basement and I'm freaking out because I'm irrational. We're talking about one of the biggest gold guys, one of the smartest market guys in the world, Jim Sinclair, talking about that this isn't a maybe, right? I mean, you're probably leaving stuff out.
No, it's no longer if, it's when. This is not a maybe. This is a mathematical certainty. Credit is going to cease. Credit is going to blow up. The markets will close at some point in time. I can't tell you when. I suspect it's going to be very soon, because all these inflection points, we're at inflection points in all markets. And as I said, it's a mathematical certainty, because there are too many promises out there that can never be paid back. They can never be performed on. And like Jim says, what good is a contract that cannot perform? Or what is the value of a contract that cannot perform? The answer is zero.
And we're talking about the derivatives and all this smart wise guy stuff where they offloaded all the risk and they have a credit default swap and they've offloaded the risk and they're safe and that bond is an asset. And
right.
We just saw what happened in Puerto Rico, that they're not calling it a default, but they're not paying. I
right.
mean, isn't that the big giant monster elephant canary in the coal mine? I mean, Puerto Rico, all that debt, poof, bye.
Well, Greg, ask yourself, the United States has, just a ballpark or round number, $200 trillion in current debt and future promises. There's no way they can pay on $200 trillion. It's not possible. So there's going to be a choice. Either they don't provide the benefits, they don't provide the guarantees, or they destroy and debase the currency and pay your dollar back at half a cent or 1 penny or something like that. That's the choice. So it's, from a mathematical standpoint, the debt cannot be paid back. And I want to ask you, you mentioned derivatives. Think about this. Think about the credit default swap market. There's credit default swaps on U.S. Treasuries. Now I'm going to ask you a question and ask the viewers a question. If the U.S. defaults and these credit default swaps need to be paid, who's going to be solvent after the U.S. government defaults to pay the credit default swaps?
That'd be nobody.
Right, that's the answer, nobody. So it's a joke. I mean, yes, insurance, that's That's like an insurance company that insures New Orleans is based in New Orleans, and the whole building comes down, and all the banks come. They all get blown away. In other words, the insurance company gets blown away with the storm.
I've asked this question from other people, and no, the U.S. will never default on its desk. And I got to tell you, Donald Trump. I mean, if you look, I'm watching this. I brought this up before. I was watching this thing where in the '80s he was the man. He became a brand, and in the '90s he got in big trouble. I mean, he made the Forbes 400 list, and then boom, he was teetering on insolvency. He goes to all the banks in the '90s and cuts a deal and says, "Here's what I need, and if I go under, you're going to look bad. You're going to get killed." Well, they made a deal with him, and he cut the debt, and that is in his gene pool. And I am thinking to myself, is he going to, because everybody I ask this, the experts I ask it, oh no, America will never default. And I'm going to ask you, will America default on its desk in some way? Print money, say we're not going to pay, hold to maturity, or is America going to default on its desk in some way, in your opinion?
That's a mathematical certainty. There is no way that the debt and the promises can be paid back. We're over 100% debt to GDP. That's on books debt. And if you went back 20 years or 25 years, you'll know that once a country got to 100% debt to GDP, that was Banana Republic land.
And we're over 100% debt GDP.
Yeah, we're 105% or something like that. And that's just on books debt. That's not future promises. And actually, the answer to your question is the U.S. has already defaulted actually twice. They defaulted in 1933 when they called the gold in from the population, and they defaulted again in 1971 when they told foreign nations that they would not honor $35 in exchange for 1 ounce of gold. They shut the gold window. That was a default.
And you brought up the $200 trillion. That's Lawrence Kotlikoff at Boston University economics professor, and he says that's an easy number to get to. I mean, that's just GAP, not GAAP.
Sure.
He says that is just there's the taxes. Here's what you said you're going to give out. Right. And he said that's a simple number. That's not a wild number. You say 200 trillion. What? Huh? Say what? That's everything. That's all the commitments. That's everything that they have to do. So that's a real number, just to let people know that you're not just pulling that out of the thin air. That's a real number by real people. And anyway, so this means that is the stock market. A lot of people think that the stock market is going to go to 30,000. Or it's going to go to 40,000. Some people think that. I don't see how the stock market, we're going to get this big conversion from debt, from bonds, which is unpayable, and it's going to be converted into equity. How can unpayable debt be converted into equity? I mean, how can something worth nothing be turned into something that's worth something? Would you please tell me that?
Well, Greg, the stock market, that's a difficult one to call. From all historical valuation levels, we're as high as we've been. I mean, we're back to the dot-com boom of the year 2000 days. We're at those levels. So the stock market is clearly way, way, way overvalued. But the big caveat is if we go into hyperinflation, you could see the stock market at 300,000. You could see it at 3 million and still have lost 50% of your purchasing power. And I'm using the number 50% because typically if you look at countries that have gone into hyperinflation, their stock market at the very beginning immediately panics, maybe drops 30, 50% or more. But then all of a sudden it starts to take off and it starts shooting upwards. The thing is, it doesn't shoot up as quickly as the currency drops. So the stock market could be 40,000, but that cup of coffee is $80. Right, exactly. Your purchasing power in a hyperinflation, the Dow could go to a very high number. But if history is any guide, typically the stock market will lose half of its purchasing power versus goods in a hyperinflation. And which brings me to gold. And you guys had on your website about capping the price of gold, and you just went down one list of things about short selling the COMEX, not going to happen. Rising interest rates, not viable. Buying dollars, promote the world peace,
please. Encourage equity speculation, not happening. And then your conclusion says gold will prevail despite all efforts of subterfuge. Will volatility be encountered? Of course, but none of these remedies are lasting. Whereas gold's inherent qualities are. Explain how that the gold is the basically last man standing. Is that what I'm supposed to get out of that?
Right, exactly. Gold. To use the words of J.P. Morgan, gold is money. Everything else is credit. Gold is no one else's liability. And as I mentioned, the problem today is the entire world is run on credit. And if you want to look at credit, how does credit work? Credit works based on trust. And what we're headed toward is an event where trust, confidence breaks down. And when that breaks down and the credit implosion begins, no one's going to trust anyone else. Bank A won't trust Bank B, and they won't trust Bank C, and around it goes. The thing about gold is it's no one's liability. Gold has value because it is. It is money.
And silver, and you're saying, and people are going to say, what's he say about silver? People ask me that right now.
Silver is going to be gold on steroids. Silver, if you look at the gold to silver ratio, it's roughly 70-1. In other words, it takes 70 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. The historical number has been about 15-1, and God's number, in other words, the amount of silver that comes out of the ground versus the amount of gold is 10-1. So the ratio should be based on just pure supply coming out of the earth. It should be 10-1 or slightly under that. So at 70-1, when credit breaks down, when all is said and done, I believe silver is going to go back to its natural ratio, which is 10-1. So it should outperform gold sevenfold.
Oh, boy.
Gold is going to come in second place as far as the best place to have capital.
And you must be, I mean, we talk about provisions and that kind of thing. I mean, the common person is going to say, well, I don't have any money for gold. Well, buy silver. Or maybe buy a set of tires for your car. I mean, shouldn't people have food and water and be able to really write out, how long this is going to take to sort this out, which is going to be maybe a long time?
Right. You can only do what you can do personally, what you can do financially. And obviously, you have to start with food. So, if you haven't been buying an extra couple dollars or $5 or $10 worth of food each week in the past, and I would say if you have an ounce of gold or some silver or whatever, I'd sell it and I'd buy food first, because what good is your gold or silver if you've starved to death? So your first provision has got to be food. And then if you have capital after that, do you really want to be in a banking system? I mean, the whole thing's going to be gone. Whatever paper balances you have, you'll look back and you said, well, I don't have it anymore.
Well, cash, 10s, 20s, 5s, 10s, 20s, 1s. Will cash work well for a few weeks? Will it work okay, or are you not in that school at all? Cash will work really good for a while.
Right. I think actually cash, $20 bills and smaller. I'm not so sure $100 bills. $100 bills may work for a week, but you can't negotiate with hundreds, because in the mindset is you can't get change for it. But I do think that currency itself will actually strengthen and buy more for a week, 2 weeks, 3, probably not more than 4 weeks, because if you go to your local farmer with a $20 bill and you say, I want some eggs and some tomatoes, at some point in time, the farmer's going to wise up and say, hey, I'm not giving real stuff away for this paper. Because, again, it's a confidence thing. The dollars are they're liabilities of the U.S. government. They're issued by a bankrupt entity.
And just that we touched on this on our pre-interview, and I just want to bring this up because I thought it was interesting because you had a different take than I did. I think at some point, like I don't know, Utah, I think a couple of states out west are basically making gold money. We're not going to tax it, just use it, spend it, whatever. I am of the mind that the Trump administration would do that. That they would say, you know what, we'd like to get your gold because it's going way higher than what it is now, and your silver. Go buy a car, go buy a house, go do whatever you want to do with it, and we won't tax you. And you're not going to get a Patriot Act, filled out on you in the bank. What do you think about actually that the government will actually, like some states, are going to view gold and silver as money just as a desperate attempt to get the economy going, or will they just confiscate it and stick a gun to your head?
If there's a confiscation, it would more than likely be gold. It would not be silver. I can't see how silver would be confiscated. For one reason, there's too many uses for silver. There's too many industrial, technological, medical, etc. uses for silver. I think it's more likely if the government were to want to begin a program of accumulating gold, what they would probably do is they would make some type of law saying that anything that's mined within the United States has got to stay within the United States. It's got to be sold to the government. Now, that's a possibility.
Or would you think you could go to a car dealership and get that 2019 Chevy Impala?
Probably not. I really don't see it coming back into the system to the point where it's actually used as currency. It can be used as currency between individuals, but I don't think on an official basis that's going to happen. I think gold will be used as a backing to whatever new currency we have, and it'll be probably done on a ratio of, 20%, 30%, a ratio backing to a new currency. In other words, they're going to back a new currency with enough gold to create confidence in the new currency.
And they're not going to make your 1986 Gold Eagle. That's the first year they came out. They're not going to make that illegal. I mean, I find it hard to believe that oh yeah, we've been selling you this for the last 30 years and it's all illegal. Turn it in now. I mean, I can't imagine them doing that. I mean, that'd be a tough sell.
It is possible. They did that in 1933. They called in the gold, of course.
That was actual currency.
Actually, while you're talking about turning in eagles, the premiums on Liberties and St. Gaudens, those are the coins that were issued 1933 and earlier, those premiums have come down drastically. You can buy one of those coins, even a fairly decent graded MS-60 or 61, almost at the same cost as an American Eagle. And it would be my guess, if gold is called in, those old coins would be considered collectibles. They'd be considered part of your coin collection. So that's one extra step if you want to try to avoid a confiscation. That might be a step that will work. And from a dollars and cents standpoint, you're buying some old rare coins basically at the same price you are with an eagle.
But the gold price between you and Jim, of course, I don't know what's it going to be priced in. Is there going to be a new dollar? Is it going to be there's a talk that there's going to be by a couple of different sources that there's going to be $2. That's going to be a internal dollar, a domestic dollar, and a trade dollar.
Yeah, that's very possible. And they would not. In other words, we have to continue to trade, and obviously we have to trade now more than we ever did because we don't make everything that we use on a daily basis. I mean, we're not self-sustainable. We hardly even have a tool and die industry at this point.
Which is why Trump is trying to bring jobs back and trying to bring industry back. And
right.
Right,
but I mean, that's reversing something that happened over 30, 40, even 50 years. I mean, there's no way he can reverse what's happened. Many of those jobs are gone forever.
God, and I don't want to. I mean, Bo Pony came out and made some hard dates for this week. I mean, he might be. The scary thing is he might be right.
Well, somebody's going to be right sooner or later. I mean, Jim Rickards has come out with what, 2 dates in the past or 3 dates in the past, and they come and go. You just have to understand the whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. Just for instance, if you go back for the 2-week period and at the end of March, the amount of open interest that increased in the COMEX silver, it was like 120 million ounces, but not 1 ounce of silver increased in the inventory. And they only produce the world only produces 800 million ounces. So they increased the amount of supply by 15%, but not 1 real ounce even came into inventory. So you just have to look at this. The whole thing is a fraud. The whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. And when it comes down, you're going to need to rely on yourself. And if you want to get capital from the current system into the next system, whenever it comes up and running, the best way to do that is with precious metals. And
you think this is, I don't want to pin you down on a date, but and the scary thing, all those guys could have been right. I mean, they could have been right. They could be right. But this is the year, right? Do you see this going past 2017 with all what's going on at this point?
Well, I mean, I didn't see it getting past the end of 2016. It could be any time. My answer to that is we should have collapsed 2 or 3 years ago, but they've with smoke and mirrors held this thing up. It's a complete, if you want to call it hologram or shell or whatever. There's no substance behind. There's no substance underneath the real economy. The whole thing is a house of cards, and it's built on credit.
And one last thing, you still work for Miles Franklin. I mean, you have an association with him or whatever. Right. I don't know if you work for him, and you and Jim are in basically business partners. Right. But you do some work for them, and there's a trend that people are bringing their gold back from overseas to the United States. Did I get that right?
Well, we've noticed in the last 3 months, 6 months, we've had contact from a lot of customers that want to not so much repatriate. They want to get their gold closer to home. People that may have it in Singapore or Switzerland or whatever. There are some people that are looking to move gold back. And Miles Franklin is actually offering anybody who has 500 ounces of gold or more and wants to store, they can store for you in the Brinks institutions in either Montreal or Vancouver. Miles Franklin will ship the gold. The logistics is difficult.
What's insured? You got it insured. You got
right, exactly. So they'll take care of all the logistics and actually ship it for free if you store with them for at least 1 year. So,
but that's a big trend. That's a trend that you guys have spotted with your contacts at Miles Franklin. In other words, that people are, I don't want my gold on another continent. I want it close by.
Yeah, it's kind of a surprise because if you go back 3, 4, 5 years ago, everybody was trying to get their gold out, and now it looks like there are people wanting to get it a little closer to home. Maybe be able to cross the border, go to Montreal or go to Vancouver, and during a crisis and actually get your hands on the gold.
Got it. Jim's, well, listen, Bill Holter, the Jim Sinclair, the wonderful JS mindset, the Holter-Sinclair collaboration. I mean, you get all the nomenclature out here. Bill Holter, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com for a not-so-sunny forecast, but a dose of, hot coffee and real reality. Thank you so much for joining us on USAWatchdog.com. Oh, one last thing. Your subscriptions, your subscribers, and you didn't ask me to do this, and I just want to do it anyway because I think it's a good service. You have a subscription service. You're up now. You've gone up about $10. It's $129 a year.
Right, $129 for the year, and basically for that, the site is kind of broken in 2 halves. One half is basically just public information. Jim and I will make a comment to an article, and we post. I don't know, maybe a dozen different articles or whatever during the week. And I write 2 or 3 articles per week, and Jim and I do a 30 to 45-minute interview that's recorded each week. And my writings and our interviews, that is for subscribers. And like you said, that's $129 a year.
Oh, wow. Two very, very bright, experienced guys. And say hi to Jim Sinclair for me. But I'll put that information for you YouTubers. And when you click back, all the links are found here. Boom, go back. After the interview, I'll put the subscription page and the JS Mindset, Holter Sinclair collaboration stuff back in there. So, Bill Holter,
thanks for the plug.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. I like you, and I like Jim Sinclair, and you're very smart, and anybody would be crazy not to listen to you guys. You're going to be right about this. The timing, the crazy, the Fed, as I've been saying in the last few interviews, the Federal Reserve has a trading desk, but that's not a big deal to CNBC. That's not a big deal that they're trading every market, currencies, interest rates,
right.
LIBOR, wheat futures, corn futures, gold, silver.
Everything.
Not a big deal that the Federal Reserve is supposed to be setting monetary price policy, is basically setting prices with their trading desk and getting discounts at the CME. But I digress. Anyway, Bill Holter, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg.